Hey there, Mama. You're listening to the Lift the Shame podcast. I'm your host, Crystal, mama of 5 and your family's intuitive eating dietitian, here to help you cut through the diet culture clutter so you can enjoy freedom with food as a family. I'm on a mission to help you end the generational legacy of diet culture in your home so you can experience motherhood free from food guilt and body shame. Listen in weekly for guidance on how you can ditch diet culture, heal your relationship with food and your body, and confidently raise intuitive eaters. Let's dive in and lift the shame together. Hey Mama, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad that you're here. And over the last few weeks, we've been exploring this topic of what it means to raise a healthy child, especially in light of what diet culture purports is necessary or needed to raise a healthy kid. And if you haven't listened to our last few episodes, I hope you get a chance to go back and explore those, because we really kind of unearth what diet culture has kind of shoved down our throats as this is what you need to do as a parent to raise a healthy child. And as you can see, there's a lot of contrast between what diet culture tells us we should do versus what our kids actually need from us. It's like night and day. And I just wanted to dive into today some more ideas and just give you some more things to think about in terms of ways to support your child's health overall, and ultimately build this sense of embodiment within your child where they can trust themselves and really learn to trust their body as the best expert of what they need. And that is going to take them so far in life. And remember, when we're talking about this, it's looking at a bigger, broader picture of health. Diet culture has truly watered down and oversimplified what health means. And, it doesn't take too long to figure out what that is just by listening to the topics of conversation that diet culture is putting out there. It's all about what you eat and how you move your body, and really overemphasizing those two things, when in reality, our health and our children's health encompasses so many other factors and many things that are really not in our control, some things that are. And, I really just hope that through this conversation and this little mini series we've been doing together, that you can feel encouraged in knowing, that it's not just about the food. Yes, of course, food is important. Nutrition does play an important role, but we don't want to be so hyper-focused on the minutia of what our kids are eating that we're missing the bigger picture. And so today I want to pick up where we left off. Last week, we started talking about just some different ideas and things that you can implement really when it comes to building a relationship with your child. And I always feel like feeding is such an extension of parenting. We don't feed our kids in a vacuum. It's happening in the context of our parenting relationship with them. And so I really believe that when we can find more joy and peace in how we feed our kids, that really pours over into so many aspects of our parenting and can bring so much, really peace in our home overall. Not to say that that's the only thing, because there's so many aspects of parenting and many challenging aspects of parenting. But when you're not stuck in these power struggles over food with your kiddos, and you really are learning to trust them and trust their bodies, and you're extending that trust to them, it's amazing how much that fosters just trust within the relationship that you're building with your child. And it's like a product. It's a product of, focusing on these bigger picture ideas when it comes to health. And I hope that these things and this topic can just, take a burden off your shoulders, because there's so much pressure on us as parents as it is. And again, I think when it comes to raising a healthy child, it's like we kind of have this imaginary, invisible checklist in our head that we're thinking like, okay, did my kid eat this? Did they eat that? Are they eating enough vegetables? And, I always go back to this vegetable piece because I hear it so often where, you might feel like that's the deal breaker. Like if my kid is not eating vegetables, then surely they're going to become unhealthy, or they won't eat healthy, or they won't eat in a healthy, life-giving way. And again, we have to remember that a lot of our ideas of what health are, whether subconscious or not, have been largely shaped by what diet culture tells us health is. And, it can be hard to extend trust to our kids when we see them eating in a certain manner that doesn't line up with our expectations of what we think they need to be doing. And again, I just want to challenge that and give you permission to break out of that and break free from that so that you can meet your child where they're at. And so many of these things that truly do support our child's overall health, not just physical health, but mental health as well, and emotional well-being, go beyond just food and just eating. And I hope that's something like a common thing that you've been able to see just from us going through this little mini series here together, that really it's more than just the food that they eat. And honestly, there's some of these things here that are so crucial to health that no amount of vegetables could achieve in terms of producing positive health outcomes. So that's kind of like our overarching thing. But I want to continue. This is part 2 from last week, just sharing some ideas here that can support you in helping your child build a healthy and positive relationship with food and their bodies. And I feel like I could do a podcast episode on each of these points here. So I'm going to try to just go through them and give you kind of an overarching idea. If there's one of these points that you're like, I'd love to hear more about that, or I'd love you to delve deeper into that, please reach out and let me know. I'm always open to your feedback and really curious about what's landing with you, what's resonating with you, and what I can help support you with more in terms of additional resources. So if there's something that I'm talking through today that you're really interested in learning more about, feel free to shoot me an email over at hello@crystalcargis.com or connect with me on Instagram at crystalcargis and let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback and produce some more additional episodes for you around some of the things that are resonating with you. So going back into this, again, these are just from my personal anecdotal evidence and also as a mom myself and raising kids and really just having this intentional desire to raise intuitive eaters. These are things that I've really seen are making a difference in my own kids' lives and also with the many families that I've worked with. And I want to share some of these things with you. But one idea here in terms of supporting your child's lifelong healthy relationship with food and their body is really just teaching them about their body. This is, again, I feel like I have a lot to say about this topic, but to try to keep it brief, I think a lot of us grew up where so many different aspects about our bodies were kind of taboo and we didn't really talk about it very often, or we didn't have a lot of conversation, or if we did have conversation about it, it probably was skewed because it came from a diet culture point of view, right? Like I know for me, a lot of the dialogue and language around bodies that I heard growing up was very much about changing your body, shrinking your body, losing weight, right? Things like that. And what I love so much, and I've seen this with my own children, but that just kind of like the natural curiosity that they have about their bodies and kind of how their bodies work and function. And, I think just kind of fostering that curiosity in a very neutral, safe space can be so life-giving to our kids. And again, just give them a place to learn to build connections with their body, to learn to be attuned to their body. And, this is something that no amount of healthy teaching about health or nutrition could ever replicate. Like you could learn all the things, but to actually be living in your body and experiencing the different sensations and cues that your body is giving you in a very neutral way without any shame or judgment is so beautiful. And if you have struggled with a tumultuous relationship with food or your body, I guarantee that there's likely been a time in your life that you can pinpoint feeling like something about my body is wrong. And I truly don't believe that we're born that way. I think it's a learned behavior. And I think the more that we can parent our children in a way that supports connection with their body and just reinforces the fact that, hey, your body is good and your body is amazing, really can go such a long way in terms of them having an embodied experience within themselves and being able to trust themselves, right? And there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. But again, I think kind of following their lead sometimes can be a helpful place. It's funny. My 4-year-old, who's my youngest right now, she is so fun and very curious and very vocal too. So she asks a lot of questions. And it's funny because she speaks about herself talking about her tummy. Like she'll tell me, my tummy doesn't feel like doing that right now, or my tummy is tired. I think my tummy needs to go lay down. So she uses her tummy as like a way to talk about herself, which I kind of love. Like, I think it's just so interesting that she adopted that language. But I also love how she's kind of learning and using that as a channel to explore the different like sensations and cues that her body is giving her. And, sometimes I'll ask her questions like, well, what does your tummy think? Or what is your tummy telling you? And, it's always kind of fun to hear her responses to that. But just being able to have those like open discussions and facilitate those conversations with our kids, again, in a place that's coming, from without shame, without judgment, just holding space for our kids and again, like highlighting the amazing aspects of who they are and their bodies. Like your body is good. That is such a beautiful thing. And really, I think this is important across the childhood spectrum. So if you have older kiddos that you are raising, this is just as relevant. And you may have different languaging to use to facilitate these conversations, but it's still equally as important. So just one more quick note on this particular point. But for example, I think especially as women, and if you remember like what it was like to menstruate and start your menstrual cycle, again, it's one of those aspects about the female body that I think is very kind of hush hush. There's a lot of shame associated with it. It's very taboo. It's not something that we openly speak about. Yet it's a part of who we are, and it's a part of how our bodies function and work. And, now my oldest is 12, almost 13, and we're definitely going through this with her. And for me, going through it with her was kind of like an invitation to attend to my younger self who needed those conversations and reassurance that like, hey, your body is changing and there's a lot of things that are happening right now. And sometimes it might be uncomfortable, but you know what? Your body is still good and it can still be trusted. And your body is going to get you through all these changes and phases. And I'm here for you if you have questions. I mean, I never had that kind of conversation when I was going through those kind of wild adolescent years and puberty and all those things. And, I just wonder, like, if we would have heard some of those things growing up about our own bodies, how differently would it have made us feel towards ourselves? And the more that we can facilitate these questions, again, I think the more confidence and trust it helps build within our children and normalize these changes and support them in being able to lean on and trust their body, even as their body changes throughout their lifetime. Because let's face it, our bodies are going to be continually changing. It doesn't just stop when you become or you turn 18 or become an adult. Like our bodies continue to change. And the more that we can have these conversations with our kids now, I think it will be easier for them to navigate those as they grow older and support them in just feeling more peace and more at home within themselves, regardless of how their bodies may be changing. So I feel like there's a lot more I can say, but I'll leave it at there for now. And with this, just really emphasizing autonomy within our kids. Like your body is amazing and you can trust your body and nobody can tell you what you need because nobody else is living in your body besides you. And that goes the same for us as parents. Like back to the food piece, when we feel like we think we know what our kids need to eat, at any given mealtime. And I see this a lot, right? Like if our kids are just eating bread and not eating anything else, and we feel that urge to just kind of insert ourselves into that mealtime experience, be like, hey, don't you think you should have some protein or try a bite of vegetables? Like it comes from that place of really good intention. However, it's those subtle messages that we're communicating where it's like, I don't know if you can really trust your body. And here, let me help you. So we want to be careful when we're crossing out of our territory and moving outside the realm of what's within our responsibility and attempting to do our kids' jobs for them. And this autonomy piece is really key to helping our kids develop this trust and confidence within themselves. Like, hey, here's the food we're having, and I trust you to eat what you need from the food that I'm offering, no matter how wildly different it looks from what I think you need to be eating. That is so powerful and such a huge boost of confidence for our kids. And again, this is kind of all encompassing in terms of teaching our kids about their amazing body, not just through what we say, but how we interact with them when it comes to food, when it comes to navigating the different life stages that they're going through. There's a lot there. So, but like I said, I could probably do a whole episode just on that one, but we'll leave it there for now and kind of jump to the next one here, which is normalizing foods that diet culture demonizes. So, oh man, there's so much to say here too. But diet culture loves to give us a list of the good foods, the bad foods. This is healthy, this is unhealthy. And again, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but the problem with that is that it creates a hierarchy, especially in our kids' minds about what they can eat or what they can't eat, or these foods are good and these are not. Now it's going to be elevating some foods over others, or because our kids are those literal thinkers, cause them to internalize guilt and shame at very young ages around certain foods because they don't feel like they have full permission to eat certain things. So there is a lot here. And diet culture will try to tell you that if you can just get your kids to eat X foods and avoid Y foods, then they will be healthy. And I'm here to tell you that nothing can be further from the truth. Anytime we smack a label on a food, whether it's good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, that dichotomy really messes with our kids' brains in more ways than I think I can even explain. The problem with that is that becomes the formulation of food rules, and it really causes a child to separate from their own intuition, from their own innate intuitive eating abilities in order to adhere to these arbitrary food rules that they have now developed within their minds. And so a powerful antidote to this is to normalize the foods that diet culture is demonizing. And, I do want to clarify, because I know that sometimes when I say things like this, it can become misconstrued. This doesn't mean that, it's just like a free-for-all, that you don't care. It's just like whatever goes. And I hope I've made that clear before on the show, but I really am a huge proponent of offering kids a flexible structure with food and reliability with food. And within that context, being intentional about plugging in those foods that they're getting exposure to or that they're starting to show interest in. And commonly that food group tends to be sweets or those processed foods or, the foods that your kids are seeing their friends eat. Like, kids are going to get exposure to these things, whether inside our home or outside. And so we want to be intentional about giving them safe places to learn how to eat these foods, how to self-regulate them. Otherwise, it will become more chaotic for them as they grow older. And in fact, we have seen that from research studies that have shown that highly palatable foods, when kids are restricted from those highly palatable foods, so those can be things like sweets, those can be things like, snacky foods that are packaged that kids love, processed foods, however you want to describe it, they are more likely to overeat them and or develop binge eating behaviors around them when they do get access to them. I've shared a little bits and pieces about this before, but for me, this was a big issue growing up. Sweets in our home were very controlled, very restricted and limited. And there was a lot of shame around eating them, a lot of rigidity around them. Like, we don't eat too much of that. It's not good for you. It's unhealthy. And I know that it was done with good intention. However, growing up, I'll never forget, going to college and living on my own for the first time and having all that autonomy and freedom to basically buy what I wanted and eat the foods that I wanted to eat. Food became so chaotic, and I fell very quickly into a binge eating type of behaviors with sweets. And it was such a big piece of my eating disorder, really. And there was so much chaos around sweets because I really never had opportunities to eat them or to learn how to eat them. They weren't ever really presented to me as emotionally equal to other foods. Like, they were definitely up on a pedestal, and not having them and being restricted from them just made me want them more. And, thankfully I've been able to heal through that and from that. And that is something that I've just wanted to do differently with my kids, like letting them learn how to eat sweets in a way that doesn't invoke shame or guilt. And also, like, they are the kids that go to birthday parties and have a piñata and are more excited about the toys in the piñata than the candy, because we have candy very frequently here in our home. And that's what we see. Like, when kids have regular exposure to a lot of these foods that diet culture demonizes, it doesn't, becomes not a big deal. It's like, okay, I learned how to eat these foods. I don't have FOMO of whether or not I'm going to have access to them. And that is ultimately so much better for their health, especially over the long run, right? Like, any way that we can decrease our kids' risk of disordered eating behaviors or eating disorders is absolutely going to improve their health and their health outcomes over the course of their life. So we have to keep this big picture in mind in order to support them, and in order to be intentional about doing these things now within our home. And I know it can be hard. Like, if you still struggle with having certain foods in your home, maybe you really still to this day, like, haven't learned how to eat sweets in a way that feels good within your own body. Or maybe you're scared, like, if I keep these foods in my home, I'll just eat them all. That is a real valid fear. And I really want to hold space for you as you navigate that. And so often, learning to feed our kids, we're also learning how to undo so many of these things that we grew up with ourselves. And, this is where it may take some strategizing and just figuring out, like, how can I intentionally bring in some of these aspects, some of these foods into my home so that my child can have an opportunity to learn how to eat them in a way that feels life-giving to them, and to support them for the long run, right? So that they have that positive relationship with food, and that this is not something that now becomes an obstacle to them mentally or physically or emotionally. And so this is a big one. It's definitely a harder issue, especially if you're navigating your own issues around food with it. But I just want you to be encouraged and know that the intentionality that you have around changing this cycle, shifting the narrative, right? Like, challenging some of these old behaviors, all of these things matter in making a difference for you and your child, and giving your child a new opportunity to learn different aspects about eating and food that you may not have had growing up. So there's so much hope, but I just want you to think about this idea of normalizing foods in your home that diet culture demonizes. And again, there's a lot of nuance here. It doesn't mean that you buy every single thing in the grocery store that your kid wants and just let them go to town. For sure, no. Like, there's a lot of intentionality in terms of structure and support with this idea. But I just want to put this out there as a starting point for you. So let's see here. A couple other things to think about. I'll jump on this one here, but just engaging in joyful movement as a family. This is a big one, especially if you've had a tricky relationship with exercise, or maybe you still do. Or, again, this is one of those things that diet culture has really hijacked. And a lot of us have grown up believing that we have to do X, Y, or Z to sustain a certain body type when it comes to movement or activity, or that, we have to earn our food, or that exercise is a form of punishment from eating certain foods. Like, diet culture has made exercise such a toxic thing. And really, like, reclaiming that for yourself and for your family can be such a powerful way for your children to learn how to take care of themselves. And really, I think exercise, just like food, should be very intuitive, where we're able to gauge what our bodies need and move in a way or rest in a way that our bodies are needing or wanting. And I love this because I see it so much in my own kids, where they naturally want to move their bodies, and it doesn't really require formal activity for that to happen. Like, some of my kids like sports, others not so much. And, we don't really force it, but it's just interesting, like, seeing how much they move their bodies just naturally over the course of the day, not because they have to, but because they want to. And that's what feels good to them. And, really seeing my kids has been so healing to me in so many ways, and definitely with exercise. I struggled with compulsive exercise in my own journey and in my history, and healing through that was such a big part of my recovery journey. And seeing my kids and how they move their bodies and how they engage in movement in a way that truly is joyful and pleasurable brought a whole new perspective to me when it came to movement. And that is something that I want you to encourage you to think about too. Like, what are things that you can engage in with your kids that feel joyful, that allow you to move your bodies in ways that are fun and not a drag, right? Like, how many times have you dragged yourself to go do something, go work out at the gym, or go run a certain amount of miles outside, whatever that might look like? That tends to become a piece of exercise or movement that can be almost imprisoning, right? Like a trap, like you feel stuck or obligated to do certain things. And really just exploring this idea of rediscovering movement, like renegotiating what movement needs to be or what it can be in order to make it more joyful and life-giving. Again, when it comes to our health, we tend to negate the pleasurable aspects of food and movement. But when we find joy, whether in an eating experience or in movement, it really does so much for our body in a positive way that promotes our health and supports more positive health outcomes overall. So that's a big one there to think about too. Another one here, and we might end with this one, but like I said, I always feel like I have so much to go through and a lot to say about each of these. But one more that I want to touch on in terms of producing or supporting more positive health in your family and with your kids overall is prioritizing safety at mealtimes. And again, this is a very layered one too. When kids feel like their eating experiences are safe, that can do wonders for them when it comes to their overall eating experiences and their eating habits. And so many of us have grown up with difficult experiences, even traumatic experiences around food and meal times. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to our reparenting mini series, I hope you can go back and check those out. But it's hard as a parent to kind of renegotiate what meal times are when you have had that history of difficult or painful eating experiences. And what can be even more challenging on top of that, like we might have a history of food trauma or trauma around our bodies. And then what's coupled with that is all the pressure and expectation of what mealtimes need to look like, right? Like, you need to have this perfect home cooked meal. It needs to be like this amazing ambiance and all the things that are not necessarily realistic. And when we can shift the focus to making eating experiences being more about connecting with our kids versus the nutrition portion, right? Like focusing on what they're eating. Another way I like to look at this is thinking about the relationship that you're building versus any arbitrary rules around what eating experiences need to look like. That can be so powerful in shifting the overall dynamic around the eating environment. Because when an eating environment feels stressful or chaotic, that can have many negative consequences on our overall health, on our relationship with food, on our relationship with our kids. And again, I don't want you to feel like now this is creating a new kind of pressure on how your meal times need to look or what they should look like. But it's more about pivoting your perspective and changing expectations around what should meal times be about. It's not about getting your kids to eat a certain number of bites of broccoli or making sure they're eating a certain portion of whatever it is that you've plated. Because as soon as the meal times become about that, it's shifting the focus. It's becoming more about control, not connection. And again, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. When we prioritize joy and connection and safety at meal times, our kids will naturally eat in a more healthful way for their own bodies. And it is so true. And it happens consistently over time. But again, shifting the focus and the narrative of what meal times need to be. And this is a nuanced topic too. And I wish we had more time to get into it today. It doesn't require meeting a certain criteria in order to make this happen, but just thinking about what your current mealtime environment looks like. And are there things that are happening regularly that may be causing undue stress on either yourself and or your child or other members of your family that are participating in that meal? And what are the sources of those stressors? Is it, again, those arbitrary rules in terms of what you feel like your child has to do in terms of eating, or even like expectations around sitting at the table? That's a big one that we will hit in future episodes. But there's a lot here, and I just want you to explore what it would look like to shift that a little bit and make your meal times be more about connecting and nurturing that connection and helping your child feel safe coming to the table. And often that includes the way we approach food, right? Making sure there are some food items that they do feel safe and comfortable with, kind of laying off any forms of pressure that might cause them to feel a little bit unsafe at meal times. It can look like examining the transitions from outside activities coming to meals. Like there's a lot here. So if you're interested in this topic, I would love to explore this more with you. But I just want you to, again, consider like, how can we shift away from those diet culture narratives? Well, it requires doing the opposite. And diet culture will try to tell you that in order to raise a healthy kid, you need to follow these rules, whereas you have permission and power to move away from that, to make it not about rules, but the relationship that you are building and nurturing with your child. And mama, there is nothing more important than that. And that is something that I hope you can take away from today's episode, that all these aspects are all about reinforcing this beautiful relationship that you're building with your child. And what will naturally stem from that are amazing positive health outcomes for your kiddos. Again, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, like that secure attachment that's being nurtured in a responsive approach to food, one that honors respect and autonomy, goes so far in so many ways. So I know we covered a lot today. Would love to hear your feedback. Please connect with me if there's anything I can help explore more with you. I would love to do so. So we're going to have another episode for this mini series next week. So I hope you come back, and thank you so much again, as always, for being here. We'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Lift the Shame podcast. For more tips and guidance on your motherhood journey, come connect with me on Instagram at Crystal Cargis. Until next week, Mama, I'll be cheering you on. Bye for now.